Sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the delay because today also we had a technical issue when we were logging in from this side. So today we are going to further discuss our topic that we have discussed so far. If I give a brief reminder, like we so far have discussed about the ultimacy and the basic characteristics of what is the ultimacy advocated or mentioned in the Theravāda tradition. Then we came into a topic called Paramatta Dhammas and discuss its characteristics. Then we started to briefly explain what are the Paramatta Dhammas mentioned in the Theravāda tradition. What are these realities? So we found Chittas, Cetasikas, Rupas, and few other realities as mentioned in books. Then we gave some explanations on basically on Cetasikas. Each Cetasika we explained in brief. And then we came into combine what sort of Chittas they associate. Then last week we briefly discussed about the Akusala Chittas and Kusala Chittas, and also about the Kama Sobhana Chittas. The Kama Avachara group we could finish discussing. Today we are heading to towards Rupa Avachara, Arupa Avachara, and Lokuttara Chittas, which are the spiritually developed, grown-up Chittas according to the tradition. Then next week we'll move to Rupa, the matter, briefly. Then we go into explain about the ultimate natures, like such as unarisen realities, anupanna realities, upadino, and so forth, and cover the entire topic of ultimacy. Now, if you remember, if you have the handout of the ultimate list of ultimate realities, we have so far discussed till the page number 4. Till the page number 4. Page number 4. Number 8 is the last Kama Avachara Chitta. Then we have 15 Rupa Avachara Chittas are threefold as Kusala, Akusala, Kusala Vipaka, and Kiriya. Kusala Vipaka and Kiriya. If you go to the next page, you find 12 Arupa Avachara Chittas. Then at the end of that page, 8 Lokuttara Chittas. So we have 15, 12, and 8. These are the spiritual attainments mentioned in the Buddhist teachings. Buddhism always mentions about the practice, what we have studied, we have to practice and bring it into our lives. So in this practice, the Buddhist practice, the culmination is found in few areas. Like we have a culmination in the concentration, and also we have a culmination or the highest goal in wisdom. So normally we say the Buddhist training is threefold, as Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. This is virtue or conduct. This is concentration. Insight or wisdom. So when we come into Sila, the highest or foremost Sila is mentioned as ordaining and practicing as a monk, because we have lots of number of Silas to live our conduct, like to make our conduct. Then we have Samadhi, the concentration. We focus on a certain object and doesn't let the mind to get distracted. The insight or the wisdom is the understanding about the life and the world. So in these, normally we discuss about the Samadhi, the culmination. The highest point of culmination of Samadhi is ends with Abhinya. Abhinya means supernatural powers. abilities. Supernatural abilities like levitating, reading others' minds, looking into past lives, looking into others' lives. So these are the abilities that normal people doesn't possess. So one gets into concentration, develops concentration, and before going into the supernatural powers, we have a stage called jhana. Jhana is called absorption in concentration. So after attaining the jhana, we come into the culmination called abhiññāna. So this is how the concentration is explained. Then when we come to insight, we have a stage called vipassana. I think most of us know this word. Then we come into maggapala. Supramundane, path and fruition. Path and fruition. This is the culmination in the insight. Normally, in our traditions, we only talk about the magga in terms of wisdom. Pala also we can insert. So just put it there. So in the path of wisdom, when we develop our insight, we come into a stage called vipassana, meditation. Then we come into the highest stage, reaches the highest goal of becoming a noble being. So when we develop our mind in the concentration field, we come into a stage called jhana, is the absorption concentration we call. Then by developing or mastering over this concentration, you come into a very special type of abilities which are called abhiññāna, by which people may be able to do things that normal ordinary people are unable. So this is the culmination in the practice: insight, concentration and wisdom. So now what we are discussing today in this practice, so normally the practice is done by kamavachara chittas. If you go into the handout of chittas, in the first page we have discussed chitta is fourfold based on the sphere. 54 kamavachara chittas, 15 rupavachara, 12 arupavachara, and 8 lokuttara, right? 8 lokuttara. So when during the practice, during the initial stages, these are the attainments. Before the attainments is also an attainment considered, and this is also considered as attainment when we come into vipassana wisdom. So before we come into the attainment, these modes, now I'll just erase the sila part, the virtue. During this part is practice. The chittas which arise are kamavachara. It means they are not the akusala chittas, not the unwholesome minds, but the wholesome minds belonging to the sensual sphere. But we have already discussed last week. At the end of lecture, we discussed about 24 chittas. Like this is what we discussed last time: 12 akusala, 18 ahetuka, 12 were unwholesome, 18 were rootless, like eye consciousness and so forth. 24 was divided into 3 groups: kusala, vipaka, resultant, and functional. Wholesome, functional, and resultant. Wholesome, resultant, and functional. So normally when someone practices, what he get is these kusala chittas, 8 kusala chittas out of the 24. And they still belong to the kamavachara realm. They are not very, we don't normally call them high attainments. So while someone practices, he gets the kamavachara chittas. Then with the attainments, when we come into this jhana, we have either rupavachara chitta or arupavachara chittas. Rupa and arupa. If you look into the handout, we have 54 kamavachara, 15 rupavachara, and 12 arupavachara. 12 arupavachara, right? And then when we come into the supernatural powers, that is a very special type of an ability. Normally we say that chitta is classified under Rupavachara. It's a specific chitta called fifth jhana. We'll discuss about this. It's just why this is not the Arupavachara chittas. That is a matter of naming the chitta and its object and so forth. So we don't need to worry about that. So normally the attainments are not Kamavachara. They are Rupavachara or Arupavachara. It means they have gone beyond the sensual realm. So the mind transcends the sensual realm. So that's what we want to keep in mind. So in the process of concentration, one attains these absorptions in concentration. You transcend the Kamavachara realm, sensual realm, and comes into a higher mind state in terms of the practice. So then when we come into the insight path, the wisdom, the same thing happens. During the initial stages, we get the Kamavachara chittas. And also from Vipassana, though Vipassana is considered as an attainment, a sort of wisdom, from Vipassana and further we go into the higher stages, still we have the Kamavachara chittas. Vipassana is done by these chittas. If Arahant does, it's functional. So normally we'll focus on here, on these Kusala chittas. Then, so the practice is normally done with Kamavachara chittas during the Vipassana stage. Then when someone comes into the Maggapala, those chittas are called Lokuttara chittas. Lokuttara chittas. If you go into the handout, the first page, under the first classification, we have 8 Lokuttara chittas. We have 8 Lokuttara chittas. So we have altogether here 15 Rupavachara, 12 Arupavachara, and 8 Lokuttara chittas. So they are found in 2 different paths. We get the Rupavachara, Arupavachara chittas when we develop the concentration. We get the Lokuttara chittas in the path we develop the wisdom. That is called the path of insight. Therefore, what we should keep in mind, both are considered attainments, spiritual attainments in terms of Buddhist teachings, but they are found in 2 different paths, 2 different practices. The practice of concentration and the practice of wisdom. Aren't they mutually supporting each other? They do support each other. For instance, someone practices concentration, and that practice or the development in his mind, the culturing of his mind will surely enhance or supports this insight practice, So that's why Buddha mentions the jhana is very useful, or sometimes supportive, becomes a base for one's insight practice. It doesn't mean that you always need jhana to go into the vipassana practice. You can do directly. So, but even if someone possesses a jhana, that will be a great assistance for his path. Then someone practices vipassana, with that wisdom you subdue certain defilements and the mind becomes purified. That purification ability or the wisdom is greatly supportive when he practices the concentration. So they are supporting mutually, they have a mutual support in terms of the practice. But what we have to keep in mind is they are 2 different paths. So normally we call this samatha and this as vipassana. The practice. But we have to keep in mind, wisdom is not only associated with vipassana. It is its scale, its range is so wide. But normally, when we come into the spiritual practice, we confine it into vipassana. Because when Venerable Buddha Ghosa started his Visuddhi Magga, he mentioned the scope of panya, the scope of wisdom is so vast that if we keep going to explain all the verities, all the possibilities of wisdom, the book would go away or go astray from the intended goal. So therefore, normally in our discussions, we talk about Vipassana practice in terms of this lecture, but we have to keep in mind, Panya's scope is not only confined to the Vipassana, it can be found in the mundane activities as well, very much found. Then, yeah, so these are the chittas that we'll be discussing today. So 12, 15, 12, and 8 chittas. So if you go into the handout again, page number 4, we have 15 Rupavachara chittas, which are threefold as Kusala, Vipaka, and Kiriya. Kusala, Vipaka, and Kiriya. If we erase these notes so far given, we find 15. Yeah, may take few minutes, few seconds to erase, I think. We go back to the normal diagram of chitta. We have Kama Vachara, 54. Then we have Rupa Vachara, 15. We have Arupa Vachara, 12. We have Lokuttara, 8. So here this Kama Vachara was divided again into Akusala, unwholesome, 12. Then we come into Ahetuka, rootless, like consciousness, like eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so forth. Then we have Kama Sobana, 24. You remember this was divided into 3 groups: Kusala, Vipaka, resultant. Kusala is wholesome, and Kiriya, which is functional. So 8, 8, 8. This is the diagram so far discussed. Then Rupavachara also we have Kusala, 5, Vipaka, the resultants, 5, and then Kiriya, functional, 5. Arupavachara is also the same. The division is same. Kusala, 4. Vipaka, because it's 12. Vipaka is 4, and Kiriya, the functional, is 4. Then we come into Lokuttara. We see 2 categories. Kusala, we call it 4 Magga. Another name for that is Magga, the path. Then Vipaka, we call it the Phala. It's also 4. So this is the ordinary sphere. This is the spiritual sphere. The ordinary sphere is also have some spiritual involvement when we practice for the spiritual attainments, but mostly they are found in the mundane activities. Then these jittas are spiritual attainments according to the tradition. So there are very specific chittas. So someone practices samatha concentration, like practices the tranquility meditation. So if he is able to lead his practice properly according to the teachings, he would be able to come into any of these attainments. So a Putujana normal person practices, he would come into any of these 5 Kusala jhanas. Then someone possessing a Kusala jhana, possessing, not losing it. Not losing it means he being a person who is capable in attaining the jhana when he likes. With that ability, if someone with that ability dies, normally he is born in the Brahma realm, which is a life higher than the normal deities, devas. So when he is born there, he get the resultants as a result of this practice. So he will be born with one of these chittas, Vipaka chittas, the consciousness which arises as the rebirth consciousness in those Brahma realms, and also performing the Bhavanga and Chuti functions. A normal Arahant attaining this same spiritual attainment would get the Kiriya Chittas. So these are the normal, ordinary Putujana beings and the lower nobles, lower Sotapanna, Sakadagami and Anagamis, attaining these jhanas, they would get the Kusala Chittas. Arahant would attain, they would get Kiriya Chittas. Non-Arahant, having gained this jhana, if he's born in the Brahma realm, he would get Vipaka Chittas. So this is how we normally explain it. Then there is in the path of concentration, samatha meditation, after coming into this jhana, Rupavachara jhana, which is associated with a Rupa. Rupa means matter normally. Someone understands that this would bring a life in the Brahma realm, but still those Brahmas, those special deities would possess certain material, like they will have a certain kind of a body, which is also a suffering. So what they desire is to get rid of that suffering of the body, the handling of the body. So they develop another type of a concentration, and then they comes into a higher jhana, which is called Arupavachara jhanas. It is more higher and more blissful than this concentration. So in that process, they would attain a certain consciousness, which is called Kusala Chittas, by certain like the Putujanas, and if a lower noble practices. If Arahant does the same practice, he would attain the Kiriya Chittas. These are the culminations of the practice. You practice and you hit on the final spot. So there, at that moment, you get these types of chittas. Then if someone dies having these chittas, possessing any of these chittas, if someone dies, he is born in the Arupavachara realm, a Brahma realm without the form, So that tribe is in that life, he would get certain Vipaka Chitta. Then we come into this is the practice of done in the Samatha meditation. Someone practices Vipassana meditation, sees the truth of the world, sees the truth of the life. After gaining Vipassana, Vipassana wisdoms, if he is able to overcome or cross the Sankarupeka Jnana properly, the last wisdom in Vipassana, he'll attain certain paths which would eradicate the defilements inherited within us. This is called Magga. Then as a result, he would get a Palachitta, which is more blissful and which focuses on the Nirvana and which removes all the sufferings or the heats that were remaining because of kilesa. So this Magga Chitta eradicates the defilements, completely remove the defilements accordingly. Then as a result, we get a Phala Chitta, which is a higher bliss, and in which the noble beings are able to abide with for a longer period. So these are the spiritual, all are spiritual attainments. There are three types of vipaka. So after someone gains a jhana, when he's born in the Brahma realm, he would get these kind of chitta. If someone gets Arupavachara jhana, he was born in the Arupa realm, he would get another this kind of resultant consciousness. If someone attains the Magga, like becoming a noble being, as a result, he would get a Palachitta. Palachitta, if someone becomes a noble being, like a Magga or Magga, attains certain Magga, that now these chittas are able to give a rebirth. They are born in a certain realm. But this Kusala is not going to give a rebirth. It would never give a rebirth. The Magga Chitta would never give a rebirth. So this Palachitta facilitates the noble being to abide with while he is still living. It's not a resultant consciousness in terms of giving a rebirth, because Magga is completely against the rebirth. Rebirth is a certain type of, one kind of a suffering, one kind of the major aspects of suffering. So the Magga Chitta terminates the rebirth instead of giving a rebirth. So therefore, Magga never gives a rebirth It prevents, now for instance, Sotapanna would never be born in the woeful realms. So he'll be born only in the good abodes, the blissful abodes. Anagami would never be born in the Kama realm. He would be born as a Brahma. So these, why a Sotapanna is only born in the blissful realm, it's not that the Sotapanna attainment gives that rebirth in the blissful realm, because his Sotapanna attainment removes the possibilities of getting a rebirth in the woeful realm. So eventually he is born in the blissful realm. So there is no other option for Karma to give results. It doesn't mean that Magga Chitta is giving him a result in the blissful realm. So Anagami has no possibility of being born in the Kama realm. So he's born in the Brahma realm. So what the Magga has done is it has eradicated the possibilities of someone being born in the Kama realm. So he'll be only the place he can be born is the Brahma realm. So therefore, we have to keep in mind, unlike these two chittas, even they are termed as Kusala Vipaka Kriya and Kusala Vipaka, this Magga Kusala would never ever give a rebirth, causes a rebirth. It prevents the rebirth in certain realms. So it's happening in a negative means in terms of prevention. So Vipaka also, now these Vipakas arise as the rebirth consciousness in certain realms, but these Vipaka does not do such a function. They arise in the practice, and it is for the their bliss, like they could attain into these chittas and remain for a while, attaining the blissful state of observing the nirvana and getting rid of defilements. So these are the spiritual chittas. So now we're going to explain these chittas briefly. These Rupavachara and Arupavachara chittas. Rupa and Arupavachara chittas. So normally someone practices the concentration in tranquility meditation. He will get now for we shall explain it in terms of kasina. We focus on a kasina, means one kind of a disc. Normally there are 10 types of such discs that we can focus. Some are actually like disc of a light, which are not hard material that we can see as in other cases. In some cases, we even take aggregates of air, like a group, like a part of air as our concentration, the object of our concentration. So now for someone focus on a kasina, we think about a blue disc, which is called kasina, Nila kasina. Someone focuses on this, keeps on focusing. Then at a certain level, in the beginning, he focuses and then tries to closes his eyes and try to see whether he can visualize this object. Then at a certain level, he will be able to see it with a closed eye. This is the material disc. This is visualized disc. Visualized disc. The material disc and the visualized disc. Then he still needs to focus, concentrate further, focusing on the disc. After you can visualize the disc, it is not necessary that you sit in front of the disc and focus any further in this material thing. You can just abandon the material disc and someone can just go into his quarters and start meditating without any disc. Then he keeps on focusing on this. There comes the visualized disc become more purified, and we can call it clear visualized. Disc. So in Pali, we have few terms for that. These. So we call this parikamma nimitta. Visualized disc, material disc. Then for the visualized, we call it Uggaha Nimitta. Clear disk is Patibhaga Nimitta. Patibhaga Nimitta. So one just focuses on with his mind, with his normal Kamavachara Kusala consciousness. He focuses on this, and then at a certain level, he attains to this. His mind is able to see the visualize this. So this moment we call a certain level of samadhi. We call it Parikamma Samadhi. Preliminary concentration. Basic level of concentration. Then he keeps on practicing further. He comes into this level. Then that samadhi is called Upachara Samadhi. Concentration higher, he's able to see this, visualize this more clearly. So at that level, we may call it, we may normally translate it as the we call it not access jhana, yeah, access concentration. Access concentration. So these are preliminary, these access. So he is about to attain the absorption, but still not. So up to here, we normally get the Kamavachara Chittas. Then if he keeps on practicing on this Upachara, now first he focused on the material disc, he focuses on it and then closes his eyes and tries to visualize it. Then if he does the practice properly, at a certain level, he'll be able to visualize the disc. Then he does not need to focus on the material disc anymore. At that level, the concentration has already developed to a certain level. We call it the preliminary concentration. Then he keeps on further contemplating on this visualized disc. The disc becomes much clearer, and that level of concentration is another stage. We call it the access concentration or the Upachara Samadhi. Then he keeps on focusing on this same cleared visualized disc. Then the disc does, now here the object has changed. Object has become more, has become a clear object. Now while the object remains the same, clear visualized disc is the Patibhaga Nimitta. The concentration develops. The concentration develops. So we normally call that concentration, when you attain that level, it's called Appana Samadhi. Appana Samadhi means absorption concentration. Absorption concentration. So now in this practice, till this moment, from beginning till this moment, we get Kamavachara Chittas in our practice. So when we hit here, we get the Rupavachara Chittas. You get the Rupavachara Chittas. So that Rupavachara Chitta is what has been mentioned. So if you go to the page number 4, that Chitta which has more absorbed in the object, which has a fixed object and which is very concentrated on a particular object, has the characteristics. So what are these characteristics? If you go to page number 4, we find Vitakka, the first Chitta, 5 Rupavachara Kusala Chittas. It has Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekagata, Sahita, Patamajjhana Kusala Chitta. What does it mean? It has 5 basic main characteristics, main mental factors. We have already discussed about these factors. Piti is the initial application to the mind. Vitakka is the initial application to the mind. Then Vichara, sustained application. Piti, the zest. Sukha, it's a Vedana. It's a blissful feeling. ekagata, the concentration, the well one-pointedness. So these chittas, this first attainment of this is associated with these 5 mental factors, which are attainments in the spirituality in Buddhist teachings. Then what happens? The yogi, having attained the first jhana, we call it the first jhana, he further thinks among these 5 mental factors which are found in the absorption concentration, vitakka seems to be a bit gross in terms of the spiritual bliss or spiritual purity of the mind. Vitakka appears to him as something which is bliss, because vitakka, it is necessary in the practice to go to the object again and again. Vitakka allows you to go to the object again and again without getting lazy or without stopping the practice, makes the mind more fresh. But that same vitakka in the unwholesome sphere, when it comes to the unwholesome side, it is very supportive in terms of thinking unnecessary thoughts, going into various types of sensual and unsupportive, unwilling thoughts. So therefore, vitakka has a dual characteristic. All these cetasikas have dual characteristics, but in terms of closeness to the akusala, vitakka is more closer than the other mental factors. So he finds it as something disturbing or something as a burden to the further spiritual growth. So he wishes to attain a jhana without vitakka. So he practices again. Normally, you don't need to practice from here when you go from the first to the second stage. You started again from here and goes into the second stage again. So when you come into the second stage of the attainment, if you go to the number 2 chitta, the same chitta arises without vitakka. It arises with vichara, piti, sukha and ekagata, without the initial application. So one number reduces. Then he further thinks vichara also appears to him, the sustained application appears to him as something from this stage to this stage and attains a jhana without vichara. Is piti, sukha and ekagata. The joy is there, the blissful feeling is there, one-pointedness is there, no vitakka, no vichara. Then he further thinks piti is also like a certain type of agitation of the mind. Happiness and having a pleasant feeling are two things. In terms of happiness, the mind is elated. It is joyful. So when feeling this happy feeling, the pleasant feeling is enjoying the object. It's enjoying its taste. When the joy is present, the mind is elated. So the yogi finds among these two, joy is much gross than the sukha. So he again practices the same meditation and comes into a jhana without piti, sukha and ekagata, 4th jhana. Then he further thinks out of sukha, among sukha and upekha, sukha is the vedana, pleasant feeling and the neutral feeling. Neutral feeling is more supportive to the concentration. So he again practices and comes into a jhana which is without sukha. Instead of sukha, because sukha is a part of the vedana, so cannot be a chitta without vedana because it's a universal mental factor. So instead of not having any sukha, any vedana, instead of getting rid of sukha, he gets into a jhana with upekka. So it becomes upekka ekagata. This is the 5th jhana. So this is the highest stage that one can attain, the highest attainment one can reach in terms of practicing rupavachara, like focusing on a material object. We start with a material thing and we visualize it, and the visualization becomes clearer. Then the concentration based on the same object, the concentration is developed. In the process, there was a gradual development in the concentration, that is true, but we can see how the object also has changed with the development of the mind. So the visualization or the object becomes clearer with the development of the mind. So when we observe the object, if the person has got a clear object, we can confirm that his concentration has already grown up. So these are the five chittas. Normally, this is how the practice is done. Then these same chittas. Now, for instance, someone dies possessing a first jhana. I'll be explaining while erasing. Someone dies possessing a first jhana. He'll be born in the a certain Brahma realm, and his rebirth happens with the first jhana vipaka chitta. Someone dies with the second jhana. Dying with the second jhana doesn't mean that you have to have the second jhana while dying. So here, dying with a jhana means dying with the ability to attain the jhana whenever he likes. So it means a possession, ability to enter into a jhana makes him a person with a jhana. To be called someone a person with a jhana, you don't need to go into the absorption. A person who has a jhana may do some other activities. At that time, he's not in the jhana, but still we call him a person with a jhana because he has the ability to go back into the jhana whenever he likes. He doesn't need to start from the beginning like the ordinary yogis. So how does someone loses this ability? Someone loses this ability to go into the jhana when he gets gross, powerful defilements in his mind. Maybe while he was doing something as some other activity, he gets a strong raga, lust, or anger. He loses the ability, he loses the tranquility, and he is unable to go back into the jhana. So what does it mean when you attain a jhana that the defilements will be subdued? That subdivision or suppression remains as long as you don't lose the ability to attain the jhana. As long as the defilement arises because of whatever reason, till that he possesses the ability to go into the jhana. So that's what means as a person with a jhana. A person with the first jhana dies, he gets the result as the second group, 5 rupa achara vipaka chitta. They are corresponding. First jhana kusala chitta gets a similar first jhana vipaka chitta. Second jhana kusala chitta delivers a similar second jhana kusala vipaka chitta. Third jhana kusala chitta gives results as a third jhana vipaka chitta. Identical. Fourth jhana kusala chitta results in fourth jhana vipaka chitta. Fifth jhana kusala chitta results in the fifth jhana vipaka chitta. Then, if the same practice was done by an arahant, instead of getting kusala, he would get kiriya, the same chittas. That's why we have 3 types of chitta. So then another useful information for many, I would think. Now we have 5 jhana factors. Vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, and ekaggata. 5. So this is the initial application. Initial application, though it appears a bit grosser when he wants to go into the second jhana, but from 0 to the first jhana, this is very useful. All these factors are utterly useful. But when you go into further into higher stages, even those useful factors may appear as disturbances. So it means for the initial practice from 0 to the first jhana, they were the real supporters that had to be developed, and they were destroying or suppressing the opposing defilements. But when he comes to a certain stage and wants to further his spiritual progress, some of these factors may appear as disturbing. Only the ekaggata would not be a disturbing factor. All the others would become disturbing when you go from first to second, second to third, and so forth. So then in the initial practice, when someone now attaining jhana means getting rid of the 5 defilements, 5 hindrances, 5 types of hindrances. So when someone has the vitakka, the 5 hindrances are kama, chanda, the sensual desire, vyapada, the anger or disliking in the practice. Then we have laziness, tina midda, and restlessness and the remorse, uddhacha, kukucha, and vichikicha is the skeptical doubt. So vitakka, out of these 5, vitakka is against thina middha, laziness. Thina middha. Because the initial application takes our mind again and again to the object, so our mind loses this retarded nature. It becomes active. Vichara, since it observes the object closely, it gets the person gets rid of vichikicha. Vichikicha here doesn't mean the doubts regarding what the Buddhist aspect, Buddhist teachings. This vichikicha is basically regarding the doubt one has about his own practice. Even a non-Buddhist, when he's practicing jhanas, if he has a doubt about his practice, or the doubt about the technique, doubt about the object, maybe about the teacher who gave the instructions, these doubts, and also about himself, whether I am able to practice or not, be able to attain or not, these doubts would get clarified when he observed the object closely. This vichikicha is not related to the Buddhist teachings here. Then piti, when someone has piti, he gets of uddhacha, kukucha. Uddhacha, kukucha is restlessness and remorse, because if the mind is elated, joyful, we don't get such emotions. Sukha, sorry, I made a mistake. Uddhacha, kukucha is sukha. Uddhacha, kukucha. When the mind is enjoying, it doesn't get that restless and remorse feeling. Piti is against anger, vyapada. We call vyapada. So when someone is happy, he does. Now here actually vyapada, this vyapada that is suppressed by piti is now normally vyapada is getting angry about someone. Here the mainly one gets rid of the dislike towards the practice. Disliking, anger can appear, the main function of anger is doesn't like in the object. So, but when we come into the spiritual practice, one of the greatest obstacles are the boredom. Boredom in the practice. We feel like lazy or retarded to initiate the practice or continue in the practice. So this vyapada, which is called arati, disliking the practice, would surely bring someone away from the attainment. So only when one is enjoying the practice, the piti is present, he'll be able to get rid of this boredom. So that's why piti is utterly necessary in our practice to attain higher spiritual progress. And even in the bojjhangas, we find the piti sambojjhanga, which is a highly necessary factor. Then when we get the ekaggata, one concentratedness, we get rid of kamachanda. We mean they get rid of, it's not supportive, get rid of the defilements. Kamachanda, normally we would say the sensual desire. So it mostly gives the idea of a lust, or sometimes the sexual or sensual lust. Here what do we mean is the ekaggata, kamachanda means the liking towards whatever object. Kamachanda can have various objects as its food. Normally its gross level is the lust, but the person who comes into the practice has in most of the cases has got rid of this lust. But the real disturbing kamachanda that needs to be overcome is the kamachanda to everything, whatever thing. Like sometimes when we are in a seclusion, we feel disturbed, or we feel like heavier if we are unable to talk with someone. If we are stuck in a certain room, if we are placed in a certain room, we just want to go out and explore the world. So these types of wantings are called kamachanda, the subtle wantings. Like sometimes when we are meditating, we just want to watch what the other yogis are doing, what is happening in the outside. So these types, and also the mind starts to wander in various types of objects. It likes to ponder in various objects, look into various objects. So sometimes people get interested in studies, interested in doing the monastic works instead of meditating while meditating. So these kind of thoughts are mostly triggered by a kamachanda, a subtle kamachanda. So how does ekaggata get rid of this kamachanda? Ekaggata means one-pointedness. It means our mind is satisfied in one particular object. So when we get a concentration, it means mind doesn't need various objects. So if we think in the other way around, like if our mind is well concentrated and mind doesn't go into other objects, it means the mind is really enjoying that particular object, enjoying the. So someone can ask, isn't that sometimes the remorse doesn't it disturb us? Like we keep on pondering on it, but that kind of fixedness of the object is something different, because it's not fixed on a one particular object like a concentration. We keeps on thinking about the story again and again. What has happened? I would have not done this, and so forth. But here, ekagata means you are fixed on an object and it doesn't change the object. The mind doesn't change the object in a one aspect. It's looking into the one aspect of the object and it's fixed. So this fixedness comes because our wantings to go into various objects has been cut off. That wanting was brought by kamachanda. So therefore, the subtle kamachanda which drags us to various objects is overcome by ekagata. So that's why all these 5 factors are necessary. The piti specifically get rid of boredom, and ekagata get rid of this subtle kamachanda which disturbs our practice, due to which we keep on pondering about various objects. So then we go into another type of chittas. After someone attained these 5 rupavachara jhanas, he may consider that these jhanas are close to the rupa because they were attained focusing on a certain rupa and a sign of a rupa. Visualize sign. It's better to say the word sign, visualize sign and clear a sign. Anyway, then after he understands that this is still connected with rupa, so then one understands this the life with a rupa is a real obstacle or real we call a burden to our life. So he wishes to attain a life without the form, and also he gets rid of the desire towards the matter. So having get rid of the desire toward the matter, having get rid of the desire toward the sign of a matter, he practices another types of jhanas which are called arupavachara jhanas. There is a slight different procedure. Now I have no time to explain it. So then he goes further and attain these 4 jhanas: akasa nanchayatana kusala, vinyananchayatana kusala, akinchanyayatana kusala, and neva sanya na sanyayatana kusala. So these are 4 stages. One first attains the first arupa jhana, then goes into the second arupa jhana, third and fourth. So if someone has these arupa jhanas, he'll be born in the arupa realm with the vipaka chittas. Then if arahant does this practice, he gets the kiriya arupavachara jhanas. So this is the normal samatha practice. Now one practices in the lokuttara realm in the sphere of wisdom. Someone practices insight meditation step by step, and then comes into a first stage attainment called sotapatti magga, by which we eradicate 3 types of fetters, sangyojana. Then he is bound to be born in the kama realm only maximally for 7 times, not more than that. Can be born in the brahma realms many times. Then sakadagami person, he again practices vipassana. He doesn't need to practice from the beginning, starting from the udayavya. It means even in samatha meditation, one has to practice from the beginning, but from when you go for the first jhana to second jhana, you start from the middle. You don't need to start from the initial stage. So likewise in vipassana, someone attains the sotapannahood. If he wants to go from sotapannahood to sakadagamihood, he doesn't need to start from the very beginning. He can start from a certain stage called udayavya and go further. And when someone attains sakadagami, he reduces the number of lives in the kama realm, the possible lives. When someone attains the anagami, he is not possible to be born in the kama realm. He will only be born in the brahma realms. Then someone attains arahanthood, there will be no rebirth at all. He will be free from all the suffering. Because all these 4 magga chittas, they cut off the defilements. So their main function is to get rid of defilement. Then as a result, he may get palachittas. Which facilitates their blissful attainments. They are blissful, like he is able to Now one attains the Magga Chitta by which he cut off the Kilesas, then the Phala Chitta occurs. Then again later on, a Sotapanna would practice Vipassana meditation, and instead of going into Sakadagamihood, he would abide with the Phala Chitta, the concentration, the resultant consciousness of the Sotapatti Magga Chitta, the corresponding Phala Chitta. Then he'll be able to remain in that concentration for a certain period of time. So it's like, if I just give a hint or just a brief explanation how it happens in terms of a diagram. A person who is practicing Vipassana meditation, we do it like few Javana Chittas arises, ordinary Chittas in Vipassana. Then at a certain stage, he gets into at the moment of attainment, normally ordinary Chittas, ordinary means Vipassana Chittas arises for 4 times, and then he get the Magga Chitta, by which eradicates the defilements. Defilements are eradicated. Then the Phala Chitta arises for 2 times and fall back into Bhavanga. Bhavanga is a normal Chitta, right? So this is the Phala Chitta. Then this is the attainment. Then later on, a noble being practices, instead of going into the higher Magga, so if this we call the Sotapatti Magga, number one Phala Chitta, he practices again Vipassana, and after the Vipassana concentration, instead of going into higher paths, he may go into Phala Chitta for many times. Similar Phala Chitta would arise many times. So we call it abiding in the Phala Samapatti, right? The number is not determined how much they can stay, right? So this is the function of Phala Chitta. So why this Phala Chitta, he was able to abide with this Phala Chitta? Because he has attained the Magga. So these are resultants of Magga. Here the resultant doesn't mean that the Phala Chitta would occur naturally to him. This resultant has to be gained with certain practice. So he has to practice, and sometimes the noble beings are unable to go into this Phala Samapatti if their faculties are not very sharp. So they would practice again and come into this attainment. Right. So these are the Phala Chitta. So I think we have given a brief explanation on these Jhana Chittas. Only the Arupavachara Chittas were not able to explain in detail. So we have discussed there are 15 Rupavachara Chittas, 12 Arupavachara Chittas, and 8 Lokuttara Chittas. Rupavachara and Arupavachara, these Chittas are threefold, each are threefold as Kusala, Vipaka, and Kiriya. And then Lokuttara Chittas are twofold as Kusala and Vipaka, and their function is likewise. So I'll be concluding the lectures on Chitta from today. Next week, I'll be talking briefly about the Rupa, what is the matter explained in the Theravāda tradition, and then go into the other topics of the ultimacy. Yeah. So this will be the lecture for today, and I give the opportunity to ask you questions and also the answers.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yes. So hi everyone. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand, or you can put your question in the chat box. Hi Bhante. Like last week we still have a question. So would you please answer that question, Bhante? I think the question is about memory.
Okay. About the
yeah,
how the
store,
memory remains. Yeah. And also there was another question raised by Mr. Ananda about the subjective and objectivity of the flavor that also need to be explained. So the memory question is a very, very broad topic actually. So what we can do is we can just mention some of the factors that facilitates the memory and how it functions. But it would take a long. It's a completely separate long topic. How it performs. It's not a simple. According to us, our understanding, it's not a simple answer saying this is the memory. Especially our Bhante Devananda did his MA thesis on this topic about how the memory functions in the Theravada tradition, and assisting that thesis, I also got a lot of understanding how the Theravadians have explained about this memory within the doctrine. So normally, when we discuss about the memory, we have few aspects to think about. We have few aspects to think about. It's like first is the input, then the output, like it comes out. There are two outputs, recalling and recognition, then retaining. The retaining. So input, recalling, outputs are recalling means we are able to recall something which has happened in the past. That is one type of a memory. Another aspect of memory is when we see a certain object, we recognize it. This is this person. So at that moment, even though there is no such a recalling, now for instance, we meet a friend, we don't need to recall his name and so forth. Instantly we recognize it. One can call it as a recalling, but we don't need to think who was he and what this is what my relationship with him. For instance, we see our parents. We just recognize this as our parent. So recognition is mostly with the present object that we have encountered, but we are familiar with it. So we call it recognition. Recognition is possible only if there is a memory about someone. So sometimes we may forget someone's name. At that time, we need to recall all the past to bring back his name. So that's why the output was twofold as recalling and recognition. Then input, they're putting the information. So when we get the information into our mind, so there are few mental factors, mental things that are necessary. Sanya is a one factor. Sanya is among one factor because the each and every object has its unique, one of a unique feature which enables us to distinguish it from others. So when the consciousness focuses on an object, the sanya becomes sensitive to this uniqueness. So what happens? That sanya causes a certain kind of effect to the mind. We attribute it in the Upanishaya Paccaya, like this sanya becomes sensitive to the object, the uniqueness of the object. It leaves a certain kind of a memory trace within the mind. So that we attribute into the Paccaya. So that we have to discuss with the retaining thing. So the sanya recognizes the object. In the first, recognize means notes the object, we call. And sometimes when the sati is present, sati, the mindfulness, well-focusedness, it's a little bit closer to concentration. Now his mind is freed from defilements. At that time, whatever the object we take remains in our mind strongly. So sati does a great job in taking the object strongly, very well. It holds the object well. And sometimes the panya is present. It also keeps a strong memory within us. That's why memorizing something with the meaning, or knowing the meaning, or without knowing the meaning, it's very easy for us to remember the quotation or the sentence, knowing its meaning. Because when the panya is performing, it leaves a very strong. The object is clearly known. Knowing it clearly would surely gives a strong memory into us. And then we can talk about javana chittas with asevana. Any javana chitta with asevana. Javana chitta asevana means it's not that the pala chitta is excluded. The strong chittas we can just call javana chittas. Javana chittas which have a powerful cognition would most of the cases in javana chittas also facilitates this taking, this knowing. So these are the normally factors that facilitates our strong clearance in the knowing. So when we recalling happens with all the atita rammanika chittas. In the Dhammasangani, we have atita rammanika. So there are 40 odd chittas in the atita rammana. When we recall, not all are counted. Most of the chittas that fall into the javana group, they are able to recall something. So there is the ability of these chittas to recall something which has happened in the past. And these chittas, these mental states, when they take the object, their Upanishya, the Pakatu Upanishya, keeps a certain kind of effect is kept in the mind that facilitates later chittas to recall it back. Then the recognition happens only with sanya. Recognition happens only with sanya. So now the sanya noted, sanya is able to recognize. But it's not that recalling has no, normally sanya doesn't play a huge role in the recalling. Sanya plays the role in recognition only normally. It is true that the sanya is found in all these chittas, but the collective function of mentalities is what is found, and also their ability to recall, which is a fundamental attribute of the chitta, is what facilitates in the recalling. Recognition happens because sanya, the ability of sanya is to note, and then what happens again, the same object is now the chitta focuses on the object, sanya becomes sensitive to its uniqueness. Chitta focuses on object, sanya become uniqueness, vedana flavor, become sensitive to the flavor, right? So this unique sanya focuses or becomes sensitive to this uniqueness. So what happens? It leaves a certain kind of imprint in our mind stream. We call it, we attribute it to the Upanishya Pachya. Then what happens? This sanya, again another sanya at a later stage, focuses on a similar object. What happens? This sanya becomes familiar. Why that familiarity comes? Because of this previous sanya has recognized, has noted this uniqueness. So what happens is the mind feels sort of a familiarity. In the second, when the second sanya arises, like chitta and sanya arises, the object and the uniqueness. So this unique, now the similar unique, not the same, the similar. When the similar uniqueness is felt to this consciousness, to the sanya, we feel like it's familiar. So that's why even in the I consciousness, that sanya is still found. So it becomes evident now when we recall and when we recognize this is his name and this is so forth and so forth. That happens with number of VTs. The basic, very basic function is that uniqueness is felt by the sanya, and the second latter stage, that similar uniqueness is felt by the sanya. So we feel sort of a familiarity. If the connection is broken, the Pachaya Sati, that will come later, the Pachaya Sati, the Upanishad force, if it is not very strong, the sanya would not feel that familiarity. So what happens? We have to recall back and find who was this person. I have seen maybe some sort of a familiarity was there, but not very clear. So that is how the sanya connects with them. So what is the connection? What facilitates this connection? The retaining, which normally the forces are given, retaining when the mind consciousness goes as a stream. So if certain input was made here and the output was here, so within this period how it remains from consciousness to consciousness, each and every consciousness. So normally we say there are few causal Pachaya forces. We put it into the Upanishad, Pakatu Upanishad. A certain kind of energy or a certain kind of a force remains within our mind stream, which interrupts or which not interrupts, it's which affects the mind stream. So a similar, when a certain object was taken strongly, that Pachaya force remains within our mind. When the necessity conditions come, this Pachaya force causes the mind. Sometimes it gets activated and suddenly we start to remember something. Or a similar object comes to us. This Pachaya force facilitates, it activates at that time. So what happens? Our mind becomes familiar to the object. So likewise, these recognition normally happens with that. Most of these cases, these paccaya forces, the recognition paccaya force, the paccaya force which recognizes is forgotten from life to life in the human realm normally. But in some cases, rare cases, the recognition could happen. That's why some people recall about their past lives and also able to tell this. So then, why this connection was made? This paccaya force was able to call into this. It is not that the memory was stored in somewhere. It's not that the memory was stored there. So there was because it was taken, the object was strongly taken, a certain kind of a paccaya force remained, and this causes that the new mind to take a similar object. So when we recall something, it's not that the object was retained in the mind stream. A certain kind of a force, certain kind of habitual, like a paccaya force, causes the mind, affects the mind. So the mind is able to take that object. That mind becomes connected with that object. It's not that the object was stuck here and it came into the mind. It's not what happens here. A force remains and causes the mind. So the mind becomes connected with such an object. Mind goes to such an object. That is what is happening according to the Buddhist teaching. It's not that the information was retaining within our mind stream. Only certain paccaya forces, such forces means, the abilities to affect the mind remains in our mind. Why they were implanted? Because of these minds, these mental states, which has that ability to leave such a trace. So that force causes the mind, then the mind takes that similar object at that moment. It's not that the mind is digging the object from the mind stream and knowing it. So that's the difference in some explanations about memory from Theravāda perspective to some other modern schools. So then, why this Pakatupanisya force could affect some latter mind consciousness after this? The reason is, even though there is one mind moment at a time, each and every mind moment is connected with the previous consciousness. There's a connection. The force, the mind is connected with its momentum, something like. So that is called Anantara Upanisya. Anantara Upanisya. So because of this Anantara Upanisya, they are connected. So the Pakatupanisya force, which was planted here, could affect a different mind. So it could affect a different mind, maybe in a different location even, as long as these mind streams are connected to each other. Then what happens finally, while for this retaining, according to Sangarava Sutta, as the Buddha has mentioned, one Brahmin claimed that he is unable to recall these incidences. So these paccaya forces affecting the mind, if it has certain conditions, if the mind is fully occupied by disturbing defilements, these paccaya forces may not function properly, will not function properly. So therefore, he is unable to recall them again and again. So then what happens? Someone getting rid of the defilements, coming into the absorption, he is able to. Then another very important aspect is, now these paccaya forces do have an effect to our mind, and the next thing is the subjective experience. Now this paccaya force, what it is, it causes the recognition, it facilitates the recognition and also the remembering of certain incidences, But when we want to go into the past, like when we want to recall one by one, it is not necessary, such a paccaya force is not necessary for us. So this paccaya force is necessary when we want to recognize, for recognition, and also to remember or recall something suddenly. But when we are looking into the Pubbe Nivasala, looking at the past lives, what the yogi does, if he attains from here, he recalls step by step, one by one. For that, Paccaya Sattva is not necessary. So what he is doing is a subjective experience, knowing the object, chitta knowing an object. That experience of knowing, that experience is of knowing can be recalled by latter chittas. Why? These chittas are connected to each other. So in the Pubbaya Nivasa, what they are doing is they recall these subjective experiences one by one. More the concentration, more the wisdom is, more you can recall into the past. Then that will be able to recall from this life to next life, all the incidences which occurred in the life are able to be recalled. So when we come into that option, it is not necessary these Paccaya forces. It's like anything that was hidden, that was covered, all can be known with the Pubbaya Nivasa Jnana. That is a different functioning, because the chittas are connected to each other, and chitta have a subjective experience which is unique, which is very personal to each other. That consciousness is able to recall those incidences, what happened in the mind again and again. So that is because of the subjective experience we are able to recall. So it's a broader topic. These are the few highlights that I would like to share. So the sanya to sanya, and also remembering a certain name or coming it up without going back from one incident to another, that happens normally with the Paccaya forces, Pakatupanisya Paccaya. And the recalling is normally ability of the mind to go into the subjective experience that we had in the past. And that all retains in because of these Paccaya forces, and keeping a very undistracted mind is also really helpful in this regard.
Okay, thank you so much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, I have a question related to this lecture today.
Okay.
So because you said that the when a person dies with jhana, he's going to be reborn in a Brahma world, I mean, corresponding Brahma world. So what it means is that the person dies with the ability to enter into jhana anytime he wants. Then,
okay, right?
yeah, right. So and then, so but so the question is, if he is not able to enter into that jhana, which means the ability is no longer there, that he's not going to be reborn in the Brahma world. So the question is then, when he attained the jhana for the first time in the Apanaviti jhana, then that jhana arose there. Then because he's not going to be reborn in the Brahma world because he loses that ability, then what kind of karma is that jhana in the Apana jhana? Because it's no longer upapacca vedaniya karma anymore. So is it going to become ahosi karma or aprapriya vedaniya?
It is ahosi in terms of janaka vipaka, and also all other vipakas. It is considered as ahosi karma. It's already destructed by its ability is removed by the defilement. So it becomes ahosi karma, we call it.
So it becomes ahosi karma.
Yeah.
So and then from my understanding is that so he attained the jhana in the Apanaviti jhana, and then he keep practicing it. So that means he keep entering into the jhana samapatti and so on, and he keep the abilities. And then the jhana in the samapatti viti is known as the garuka karma. So the question now is, which jhana give the result? Is it the jhana in the Apanaviti jhana or the jhanas in the Samapatti jhana to give the result?
That is not specifically mentioned. It seems like the stronger chitta would give the result. Seems like that, but it is not necessarily. Even the first VT can also be a result, but it is not specifically mentioned whether it's the first chitta or the samapatti chittas would give the rebirth. Any chitta could be.
Okay.
It's not specifically mentioned. So Even if, for instance, he attains the jhana for the first time and goes into the Paccavekkanas and he suddenly dies and he is unable to attain the Samapatti again, still he'll be born in the Brahma realm with that only one consciousness which arose within him.
I see.
So those in Paramatha Dipani, they mention even someone has not mastered, just immediately attaining that chitta is also able to give a rebirth.
Okay, Bhante. So if that's the case, then let's see. So he has a lot of Javana chittas there. Then one of them is going to be the Apapacca Vedaniya. Yeah, and so the rest is going to become the Apapapriya Vedaniya, Bhante?
No, they are going to be Ahosi.
So all of them will be Ahosi.
Yeah.
Okay.
All of them will be Ahosi.
Okay.
Because
Thank you.
That one chitta will give Patisandhi, Bhavanga, and Chuti in the entire Brahma life.
I see. Okay, thank you, Bhante. So yeah, the next question is, so the question is, when you said clear visualization, do you mean the kasina become crystal clear or clear as a clear vision?
It's like the kasina becomes very clear. Kasina becomes very clear. In the normal visualization, whatever normally when you make a disc, material disc, there can be some defects in that disc, right? Like we are not able to make it perfectly. So most of these defects can be found in the visualized disc. So when we come to the clear visualization, the idea of a blue disc, we are not the clear visualization is not an identical disc with what we have been focusing. The visualized disc is more closer to what we have originally been focusing, the material disc. So that's why most of the defects that are found in the material disc can be seen in the visualized disc. But when we come to the clear visualization, the idea of a blue disc become more vivid, and then those defects are no more found in the clear visualization. So it's not a visualization of we can say it's a clarity in the vision, but it's better to say the concentration has developed. The idea of the object is more clearer. It's an idea like a Panyat concept. So idea is clearer. So the disc has become more clear. So therefore that we need to go into what is the object of kasina. Object of kasina, we say now, for instance, we make a blue disc. That disc, hard material disc itself is not the object of kasina jhana actually. It's the idea of a blue disc. Now, when we focus on a blue disc, blue colored disc, if we consider this as a blue disc, now this, just consider this is blue color. So now this, when we say blue, we have two meanings in it. We can either refer to the blue color or we can refer to a blue thing, something which is blue. So something which is blue means the blue is predominant in this object. This is an object made out of 4 great elements in which the blue is also predominant, can be found. So the second meaning of blue is we call blue to the entire object together with the 4 great elements and also together with the color. In the first instance, we call just the blue color of the object. The blue color remains in the object. The second aspect, we are taking the entire object as blue, a blue object. So this means a blue thing. If you take it as a disc, a blue disc. So blue disc is a conceptual idea based on the ultimate realities that we found here. So what we are focusing in the kasina is this idea of a blue disc. Sometimes people may think like you look into something and when you close it, you can see a certain light image in our mind. Like when we close, we look into a light bulb. Then we just close our eyes, we can still see a certain image. This is not the object of kasina. This is just something which has happened physical. It's a physical effect. Object of kasina is the idea, the blue disc, the hard disc, the water disc or something. So this idea, it's a conceptual one. So when we keep on reminding this idea of blue, what happens in the beginning, based on the object because obviously we focus on the object or on a certain object to take the idea clearer. So all the defects in that object can be found in that first visualization. So then we keep on looking into that object, observing that object, again clarifying the idea of a blue disk, again blue. Then what happens? The idea of a blue disk become more clearer. So idea of a blue disk, the pure idea of a blue disk doesn't have these defects normally. So that's why it says defects of the nimitta are not found in the clear visualization. So that's how we explain. It's now object, the clear visualized object is not the identical object that we were observing. So in the end, what has happened, our focus has shifted from an ultimate object into a conceptual object. The conceptual object of a blue disk is pure or clear from all the defects.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu. Please go ahead, Sayale Punya.
Yes, Sally.
Good morning, Bhante. So I have two questions. One question is regarding it sounds like a memory part.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes in our daily life, we met someone, or if we encounter some incidents, so we suddenly remember, oh, that was happening in our dream. We had seen her or someone in the dream, but during dream we have only Bhavanga Jeta, right? So only the Bhavanga Jeta function like that. So how can we, in the daily life, we recognize someone, oh, we had met her in our dream?
So dream, we normally call the state of kapininda, the sleep of a monkey. Sleep of a monkey. Monkey sleeps on trees, and it is unable to go into a very deep sleep like human beings who does sleeping on a bed. Because if he goes into a deep sleep on the treetop, there is a possibility that he may fall down. So normally the monkeys in the forest are not going into a very deep sleep like the humans does while sleeping on a bed. So they always suddenly, when they go down, like their body starts to fall down, they suddenly wake up, unless he finds a good place to sleep without falling down. So this is called kapininda. So when in the dream, what happens is our mind is in the bhavanga. Our mind goes into the bhavanga while we are sleeping. But when we dream, certain chitta vittis arises. Those chitta vittis are weaker. They are weaker, but still javana chittas arises. With these javana chittas, we see the dreams. But these javana chittas are frequently occupied by bhavanga chittas in between the vittis, more bhavanga chittas. And then these vittis, like we have bhavanga chittas, bhavanga process, and then suddenly we have viti processes, again bhavanga, again viti. So this happens in day-to-day life even. But if we are wake up, this bhavanga, even the bhavanga has a slight difference at that moment. Viti chittas are higher in power. So while we are sleeping also, the vitis arises. It's not only bhavanga. With bhavanga you see nothing. And day-to-day life also we have viti chittas, but they are distinctly different. There's a huge contrast. Contrast means I would say very obvious difference between them can be observed. These chittas. Now, for instance, in the Vinaya, Buddha have laid a rule in the first Sanghadisesa. If such a fault happens during the dream, that is not considered as an offense because it was not in our own control. So how do we distinguish mainly the dreaming consciousness and the daily normal consciousness? Is we are unable to have control over it. We are unable to have a control over it. Even well disciplined or even conscious person, I'm not talking about insane people, a conscious sane person, even a sane person is unable to have control over himself during this period. So there is no offenses were given while someone is dreaming. Only at this moment we are able to have a self-control. So therefore in dream we do have Javana Chittas, but they are hugely different from the Javana Chittas that we experience in day-to-day life. It's not that the Bhavanga is only arising in dream.
Okay, Bhante. So
you can search this Kapininda in the commentaries. You will be able to find.
Okay. My second question is for the Sukha Vipasaka Anagami person.
Yeah.
So how can they reborn in the Rupa Brahma at that moment? What happened about them? I remember in our BA class, the time the Sayadaw said during that moment, there are some for Anagami, for the Sukha Anagami. So the Sukha Vipasaka Anagami, so there are some forces, their forces, they can make them to reborn in the Rupa Brahma. This forces is similar like the jhana factors. So I just want, what kind of this that make the Sukha Vipasaka to Anagami to reborn in the Rupa Brahma?
It's a very tough question. Normally the commentators say, what the commentators' idea is, even a person who has no jhana but attains the Anagami state, the Sukha Vipasakas, because there is no possibility whatsoever for him to be born in the Kama realm, because the defilements have been removed. Defilements out of the Kama and the defilement is the foremost in terms of giving the rebirth. So therefore there is no possibility at all a Anagami is born in the Kama realm, right? But still he possesses the Kammas to be born in the Kama realm, because he has done a lot of good wholesome deeds in the past lives. So he has the Kammas to be born, but the Kama, because there is no assistance from the defilements, he will not be born in the Kama realm. So therefore the biggest reason for the birth is the respective defilement. So therefore Anagami is not possible at all according to the Buddhist doctrine to be born in the Kama realm. But then the next problem is, can he get liberated fully? Because there is some subtle defilements left within him, which attracts himself to the Brahma realms. So he may not have a wish to be born in the Brahma realm, but inheritedly he has not got rid of this defilement. So what happens here comes a natural law we call Dhammata. We call it Dhammata, which is a natural law, because there is no possibility for him to be born in the Kama realm, and there is no possibility that he would get parinirvana, complete cessation, because still there is some defilement. So we come into a huge, I would not call it a dilemma. Now there should be some way for this phenomenon to happen. If he gets attained parinirvana, it means with remaining kilesas, the cessation, the suffering has been ceased. It's a big problem. Then if he's born in the Kama realm, without the defilements, he's born in the irrespective realm. So then you cannot guarantee why some person is not born after attaining parinirvana. So all these problems are there. So what the commentators have suggested that in such scenario, most of the cases, a Sukha Vipasaka Anagami would attain the jhana during his practice, during his life normally. But in case it's not because that he wants to go into the Brahma realm, normally it would happen, and he is more into secluded life because he has given up all the karma desires. So normally, naturally, such a person would go into a higher concentration. That is the natural phenomenon. Mostly can happen, but it's not a must, because there are some arahants also who has not mastered the jhanas. Then the explanation comes in suddenly, if he dies suddenly without getting into the jhana. Even a sudden death, the example is extreme. Like while he was sleeping, someone comes and cut his head. There's no opportunity for him to get conscious about it. So even at that moment, as a law of nature, this is the point where the law of nature comes. Law of nature, which cannot be violated by any means. Even the Buddha cannot, no one can violate it. One chitta would happen after another chitta. If karma was done, result would come into that particular mind stream only. So likewise, the law of nature comes forth because he is unable to attain the parinirvana, he is unable to be born in the karma realm. So as a law of nature, somehow, some way or another, he would attain the jhana before his death. Then he possesses the jhana and he dies and he will be born in the Brahma realm. So the law of nature comes into the play and he would attain the jhana. That is how it has been explained, because it was not just a superstitious explanation. Because if you go into the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, you find that there is a two impossibilities in two different extremes. Like if he dies without a jhana, he has to be born in the karma realm, but there is no possibility. Then if he is born, it violates the entire doctrine. One is born in a certain realm without the respective defilement. So then why can't someone be born without the defilements? Arahant can't be born in any sort of realm. So it violates the entire fundamental. Then can't he attain the parinirvana? Then what happens? The person with defilements has completely ceased the suffering. This also, then why it is necessary for us to attain Maggapala, because there is a possibility that we may be also, the suffering may be ceased. So then what happens? There are two extreme violations of the very basic fundamentals. So the Dhammata comes. So it's not a violation of the fundamentals of the teachings, because these fundamentals, according to the Theravāda, the fundamental means a natural law. These are natural laws, fundamental. So since the two natural laws are which are unable to be violated, so another natural law is that somehow he would get the jhanas and he will be born in the Brahma realm.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So the next question is, out of the four Sankata Paramattha, could you please remind us the difference between Upadino and Anupanna, because they seem very similar?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll be attending these topics in another, not next week, the next week I'll be starting the Upadino Dhammas. It's a good question. Like Upadino Dhamma, Anupanna Dhammas are the reality that are supposed to arise in future. And out of some Anupanna Dhammas, in some cases, the resultants, its karma, its cause in some occasions has gained the opportunity. Now we have to talk about what is gaining the opportunity, which I'll be discussing in another 2 weeks. The karma cannot give results just out of nothing. There is a point called phenomenon called getting the opportunity, finding an opportunity for the karma to give result. So after the opportunity is gained, it dominates that arena. That's why after the opportunity is gained by a certain karma, if a kusala karma gained the opportunity close to death, our mind mostly inclines toward akusala thoughts. If a kusala karma gains the opportunity, our mind inclines toward kusala. Not always, but it inclines. And also lots of good things happens into our life. Same thing happens with the akusala karma. So what happens in such scenarios? Now, after it has gained the opportunity to give a rebirth, for instance, it can happen while we are living also. After it has gained the opportunity to give a rebirth, it's now, before getting the opportunity, we have the possibility to be born in the next realm, next life. Maybe, for instance, I hope my next karma has not gained the opportunity yet, so I'll be able to live for some time. So, but still, I have the potency to be born in the next realm. So at this moment, my next rebirth, which is not decided yet, has not been decided yet, is an Anupanna Dhamma. Because I have the possibility to be, those things are possible to arise. So if any reality which has a possibility greater or lesser, if any reality has the possibility to arise, the reality that would arise is considered or coined as Anupanna Dhammas. So among these realities, some in the terms of now, think now my next rebirth. Now, if my karma for the next rebirth has gained the opportunity, for instance, if it is gained now, my next rebirth is now some kind of resultant consciousness is going to happen, but it has not arisen yet. So the karma, the main cause, has gained the opportunity. So now I'm much closer to this resultant. So that resultant is considered upadino because the cause has gained the opportunity. Now, a doctor recently gave me a nice simile in a personal discussion about upadino the anupanna dhamma. Yeah, she asked me, isn't this a good example? I feel it's a good example, so I'll try to bring it into this context. Think about birth of a child. The child, the born child is the reality. Born child is the reality. Consider this as something which is going to happen in future. Now, a mother, a lady with a womb getting married with a father, a man, and they have a possibility, if they go into the intimacy, they have a possibility of giving birth to a child. So as long as the mother has a womb, and as long as she does the intimate act with the particular male, if I go frankly, so as long as these things are visible or possible, these things are happening, there is a possibility that a child would be born. The only thing that the child is not possible to happen, one thing is she doesn't do the intimate act or completely remove the womb. If the womb is removed, there is no possibility a child would occur. So as long as the womb is there, as long as the intimacy is happening, the possibility for a child is there. Now think, a child has conceived. The lady is conceived with a child. So in that occasion, the child has not been born yet, but the fetus is found. It's almost to happen. Now we can see a difference. The same child, the possibility of a child was there while the womb and the intimate act was happening. Now, after the child has come to the womb, still it's not, I'm just distinguish that fetus and the child are two things in this case, what I'm saying. Fetus and child are two things, not the same in this simile. Still it's growing. It's not has grown up into a complete child. So, but now the result is almost to happen. There can be a possibility the child can die. So upadino dhamma, the karma has gained the opportunity. We can suppress the karma and get rid of the upadino dhamma. The possibility is there. Always the possibility is there unless it was a anantariya karma and so forth. So now after the child is in the womb, now the child is supposed to happen. Now at this level, we can call child as upadino. Now the child has become upadino because it's about to get born. But before the fetus was there, the child was considered as anupanna because the possibilities were there. Can't the child be called anupanna while the fetus in the womb? Yes, still can. But not according to the Dhammasanganistika, but according to the Vipassana idea, still it can be called anupanna. Whatever reality that is supposed to happen, whether the cause has gained the opportunity or not, it's anupanna. If the cause has gained the opportunity, like the karma has gained the opportunity to give a resultant, that time we call it, specifically we can call it upadino. So this is the two different things. So you can put upadino dhamma into the anupanna category in terms of the Vipassana classification, not in terms of Dhammasangani. And also paramatta jatikas can also be called into anupanna. I'll be discussing them, how they fit to be called anupanna. So therefore anupanna is the broader topic. Upadino is part of them. Paramatta jatikas have a separate, distinct characteristic. At the same time, there is a way that we can call them anupanna according to the literature. I'll be discussing them separately and overall discussing their common characteristics in another. After the next week, I'll be crossing over this paramatta lecture, paramatta dhammas, and coming into these topics.
Okay, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. So one more question and one more hand, Bhante.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I
so,
think I couldn't answer Mr. Anand's question. Okay, we'll see what the question is. Yeah.
okay, yes. So the one question is, so this related to the memory as well, because when you talked about you explained about the memory, you mentioned the Bupe Niwasa Nusati, right? And then you said that it is the subject experience because the mind connected to each other, so it can recall. The question is, how does that work if you remember somebody else's past lives?
That's a very good question. When we remember the lives of our lives of others, past life of others, which is a very difficult thing to be done. Normally, according to the commentary explanation, Pubbe Nivasa specifically refers to our own lives. Ability to recall the past life of others can be seen in the Buddhas, according to that. But there are a lot of instances that Savakas have done it. So there's no doubt Savakas can look into the past lives of others. There's no doubt in that. And it's also possible. So then how does he do it? Is it now recalling your own life with Pubbe Nivasa, recalling the past life of another with Pubbe Nivasa, and also recalling inanimate objects past? For instance, what was happening here 1000 years ago? Even that is called Pubbe Nivasa. All three are called Pubbe Nivasa. Recalling your own lives, recalling the past life of others, recalling inanimate objects, past of the inanimate objects, all are considered as Pubbe Nivasa. So, but they have different experiences. So when we recall our own past life, it's like recalling our own subjective experiences. But when we recall other one's lives, there is two differences in it, according to Nama and Rupa. If you recall the mind of someone for 7 days, it's still considered as Parachitta Vijanana. If you go beyond the 7 days, it's called Pubbe Nivasa. If you in terms of Rupa, if you are recalling the past Rupas from that moment, what was happening in his body, we normally term it as Pubbe Nivasa. So it is one way of distinguishing thing. But one sub-commentator has mentioned this. Then a question comes, he recalls the entire yesterday of a person, mind and matter both together. How do we call it? So normally we would call it Pubbe Nivasa. Anyway, that is one categorization we find in a sub-commentary. So anyway, we recall the past lives of others, past, not only past lives, what was happening in this life in the previous times, both fall into this Pubbe Nivasa categorization. So what happened is, the experience is quite different. It's like, now when we look into the other one's mind, we just go into his mind and observes. It's not like observing our own mind. It's just observing someone else's mind. So then based on that, he is able to recall what has happened in others. So therefore, when I say the subjective experience, recalling the subjective experience is only unique to someone's own Pubbe Nivasa. There's a slight difference in the experiences while he recalls someone else's. The possibility is there. The possible is there because if you can look into the other's mind, it means you can look into the past of their mind. So it's a possibility is there, but the experience is different. Experiences would happen, recalling your own experiences and recalling other one's experiences.
Okay, thank you so much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Please go ahead, Mr. Ananda.
Yeah.
Actually, my today's question is about Kasina. Maybe I can ask it next time if you have time to answer the subjective, objective matter.
What would you prefer? Subjective one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much.
Yeah. So Mr. Anand was asking yesterday a very good question, like objective. We said the flavor of an object. I mentioned about subjective and objective. Objectivity and subjectivity. Subjectivity and objectivity. Subjectivity means we see a certain object, it becomes desirous or undesirous based on our own perspective. For instance, the same excrement, which is really disgusting to the humans, would be something pleasurable to the pigs or to the dogs. And the same food that is really tasty to one nationality Like for example, Sri Lankans would be really difficult to be eaten by a Westerner or a Myanmar. The food that are really preferred by the Myanmar people may be disliked by some other nationalities. Why is that? Our tongues have been used, our noses are used to certain smells, our tongues are used to certain tasters, and our perceptions, certain kind of, for instance, animals, some people cannot eat certain kind of meat, certain kind of vegetables. So these are subjective influence is greatly there. Objectivity means regardless of our perception, the object itself has an inbuilt quality of goodness and badness, pleasantness and unpleasantness. That is the objectivity. So I mentioned, according to the Buddhist teachings, basically we define the realities on objectivity. Like regardless of the person's perception or the idea, the object is considered as pleasant or unpleasant. So that's why the Buddha mentioned a pleasant object can be seen as unpleasant by Arahant. Unpleasant object can be seen as pleasant. So the first phrase itself indicates that the object already has or had a certain inbuilt nature of pleasantness and unpleasantness. So the Theravadians stand upon here. But at the same time, the subjectivity is also found. Now, if we go into a VT, now, for instance, we normally have a few types of VTs, chittas, just to indicate. Then we have javanas. Then we have tadalambana. The subjectivity of the desire comes from here normally. The objectivity, the object is felt in its true nature, like based on its real flavor, right? We can insert here also. Sorry, this one is we'll just leave it apart. This Vo and Sa, these chittas have a they will fall into one category. It can get complicated if we talk about these chittas. So now here, objectivity. Viti is the only reason, because there is no involvement of our thoughts into these chittas, knowing of these chittas. But here, sometimes the objectivity plays, because that's why most of the people do like certain pleasant objects. At the same time, there is a subjectivity. That's why a certain object that is desired by a certain being is greatly disliked or pushed away by another being. So therefore, when we come to the Javana level, subjectivity can be found. That's why the same Buddha's figure, which was really attractive to most of the beings, not only Buddhists, because of their ideologies, some would dislike it. Same would happen for Jesus Christ, who was considered as a very beautiful, handsome figure. Person who doesn't like his doctrine would try to adverse him. Like originally, naturally, he possessed a beautiful, attractive figure, which is attractive to any being, regardless of his faith. But if our faith comes forth, you'd try to feel resentment towards it. So that is our subjective influence is found in the object. So objectivity means the object naturally possesses a certain inbuilt quality. But then what happens, this is what I was mentioning last week. But when we have to go, because Seale personally asked me, once Seale asked me a question and we had a discussion on this. So also, which I was unable to explain in that lecture, because because it came as a normal question, we were going into this level. But here even, we have another aspect of subjectivity. Here, what I meant by subjectivity is our thoughts, our ideologies, our cultures, how we are affected by our environment, the society, how the thoughts that we have developed, adversities or likings that we have developed towards certain things. So these things are what I call as subjectivity. But there is another type of a subjectivity. For instance, the same object, the same pleasant. Now we consider a cotton cloth. a cotton cloth. So the ultimate classification has come based on the human. That's why I explained that day. How to decide whether an object is objectively good or bad is decided by how the humans react upon it. Whether that classification is perfect or faultless or faultful, that is a different case. That is how the Theravadians explain. Now, according to them, Theravadians, a pleasant cotton cloth, if I take this as a cotton cloth, which is not very pleasant to the hand, but anyway, if we consider this as a pleasant one, now this is considered as an object which has a good inbuilt pleasantness, because when I touch it with touch my hand with it, I feel a very pleasant feeling. But that same cloth which had an inbuilt pleasantness was touched on my eye, would give a completely different painful feeling, bring a great painful feeling. So what happens? The same object has brought two different feelings in us. So there is now the thing was, now a person who sees a beautiful color and the same color was seen by a colorblind person, how he would feel, what kind of experience that he has. Is it a kusala vipaka or something that we have to consider. Now in that sense we have another subjectivity. Subjectivity means based on the conditions of your senses. The condition of your senses also plays a huge role in tasting the flavor. So that's why the same hot water, which was a very pleasant object to our body during the winter, would be a disaster, like would be really brings torments our body if we take that same hot water at a noon in a summer. So the hot water hasn't changed. The thing is, based on the outer conditions, our condition of our body, so the conditions of our senses have changed. So the same object which was felt pleasantly would be felt unpleasantly in a different occasion. The same object based on the nature of the senses would be felt unpleasantly. So then there is a subjectivity which we cannot deny, that is based on the nature, the material nature of the sensor. The same thing, sometimes I'm not able to say whether this is ultimate classification or not. It is ultimate classification or not. When we are in hunger, any food would taste very pleasant to us, right? So likewise, there is another subjectivity that we have to bring here, that is the nature of our senses. So when we say excrement is liked by a dog but not by the humans, mostly the object itself has a bad quality. So it's liked by a certain being because of his, we call vipallasa, of its nature, the life is born into. Or maybe someone can say, also someone can bring an argument, plus because of his sensor, the nature of the sensors of the dog or sensor of the pig is slightly different. So he may feel a pleasant smell. I'm not sure if someone can bring an argument. If someone speaks like that, then we have to say, okay, even a pig would experience a pleasant smell. If the conditions of the senses are different from the humans, which we are unable to, surely will not be able to distinguish in any means, because we are unable to go into another one's sense and feel how they feel. So if we talk in the general sense, in the human our own experience, according to Theravadians, the object itself has an inbuilt quality of pleasantness and unpleasant. That's why many people tends to like a similar kind of object, while doesn't like dissimilar objects, some objects, and terrifying objects. Most of the humans feel terrified in certain objects. Most of the humans will adore or like certain types of objects, like a sweet baby and so forth. Some may not like. There are certain exceptions. So likewise, the objectivity is found in the Theravada tradition. Our ideologies have also influenced, but the ideology influence comes only from here. But there is another type of subjectivity, that is the condition of our senses. In that case, even all these consciousness are affected by them. That's why the same hot water that was a pleasant object to our body became unpleasant in the summer. Yeah, that's the explanation that I would like to offer.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you so much.
So I think we'll call it a day because time has already passed. So thank you for joining. We'll meet next week and wish you all the best. May this merit support us to attain the nirvana quickly, and also may the Buddha Sasana last long, facilitating this taste of experience, the taste of Dhamma. Buddha Sasanang Chirantitatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantitatu, Buddha Sasanang Chirantitatu, Sadhu, Sadhu, Sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much, Bhante.